everyone. Welcome back to my program, Music and Literature. My name is Kathleen Collins and I am a violinist in the Cleveland Orchestra. So nice to have you with me again. We are talking in this particular section of our program about stories and how they relate to certain types of music. The last time, if you were with me the last session, I played a musical piece that I told you was written in story form. So it follows along very, very closely with the story structure that you've learned all about in school. So if we can refresh your memory a little bit, we talked about the three main sections last time that are present in story structure. So those three sections were the beginning, the middle, and the end. And that's true for almost any story or novel that you discuss in your classroom. It's a structure that's been with us in the history of literature all the way from 3,000 years ago when the Greeks were writing until current present day writers, whether they're in Africa or America or China or Japan or South America. The story structure pretty much stays fairly standard. And that's what we learn about in school. The type of music that I'm playing for you follows along with that structure really closely. So today what we're going to do is talk about the beginnings of the story. I'm going to read for you a story that you're probably pretty familiar with. I'm sure you've all heard of it before. It's called Little Red Riding Hood. And we're going to discuss the beginning and the kind of things that you find out about in the beginnings of stories, what's important, what information is shared by the author in the beginnings of stories, and why that's important. And then we'll compare it to the beginning of my musical piece. So just so that you're aware, I'm not going to show you the pictures of the story. I'd really like you to use your own imagination to determine for yourself visually what that looks like to you, so you can make it very, very personal, your own version of this story. So the story title is Little Red Riding Hood. Does that sound familiar? Probably. So here's the beginning of the story. Once upon a time, and it was a very long time ago, at the edge of a very large forest, there was a tiny village. At the end of the village, on the edge of the forest, lived a little girl and her mother. The girl's grandmother loved her granddaughter more than kittens love mischief, and had made her a beautiful red cloak with a hood. The little girl wore the velvet riding cloak everywhere she went. She wore it so often that the other villagers called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to take a basket of good food to her grandmother, who was feeling sick. "Go quickly, dear, and don't wander through the forest," she told her little daughter. "Stay on the path. Grandmother is waiting." Little Red Riding Hood promised to go straight to her grandmother's. She put on her red cloak and set out right away. All right, well, that's the beginning of our story. What did we find out about? What kind of details did the author present to us? So a couple of key things that we always find out about at the beginnings of stories. We found out about some characters, right? Characters are either the people and the animals that are the main players in the story, if you will. Sometimes we call them protagonists. In this case, we're going to call them characters. So the first main character that we found out about was Little Red Riding Hood. We found out some specific details about her red cloak and about how her grandmother loved her. So she sounds like a nice little girl. You can imagine her in your mind, however you'd like to imagine her. In addition to Little Red Riding Hood, we also found out about her mother, right? And even though we didn't interact with the grandmother, we heard about the grandmother. So that's kind of three characters altogether that we found out about at the beginning of the story. The other element that's really important in the beginning of the stories is to find out about the setting. So the setting, it tells us where the story takes place. In addition to where, it might also tell us when the story is taking place, in what season, in what time period. That's all has to do with the setting as well. All right, so really key important items. You meet the characters and you find out what the setting of the story is. That always happens in the beginning of written stories. You may also get a little hint about what's to come in the next section. So like we saw, Little Red Riding Hood was heading down the path to take her basket of goodies to her grandmother. So that sort of sets us up for the next session. Now, I'm going to play the beginning of our musical story, and we'll talk about what we find out in this beginning too. So if you can sort of start to see in your imagination Red Riding Hood, instead of characters, because obviously this isn't a story that's told by words, this is a story that's told through melodies and tunes. Instead of a main character, we have some main melodies or tunes. In music terms, we call this the themes. So in this opening, we have a couple of different musical themes that serve as characters. Now, throughout the piece, you may hear versions of this theme coming back. It's the kind of thing that when you leave a concert, you might start to hum to yourself because they've become very familiar to you. So we have our first main theme, which takes the place of a character. We have this. Happy little happy-go-lucky tune, I think. Maybe we could say that that's our Red Riding Hood tune. Now we have another theme that comes up right after that. It sounds like this. Also a very nice, happy sounding tune. It's maybe a little bit more assertive and aggressive. Maybe we could call that our mother tune. So we've got one main theme followed by another main theme. Those are our two characters. Now, as far as setting goes, we talk about setting in music more in terms of the mood that's being set at the beginning. So I would think that you'll agree with me in thinking this is more or less a happy, cheerful, maybe even rambunctious kind of mood at the beginning that's set with this theme. Sounds pretty happy and cheerful to me. So I would say that is the setting for our musical piece. And at the very end of this segment, you get a little hint that the music is heading into a different section. So kind of imagine Red Riding Hood heading down the path into the forest. And we'll see in the next section what awaits Red Riding Hood, what's coming up for her, and also what's coming up in the middle section of our musical piece. Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye.